Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Ophelia Burnett, and I am the democracy organizer with Open Democracy. And welcome to Open Democracy's Voter-Owned Elections, Reducing the Influence of Big Money in Politics workshop. So to get us kicked off, I'm going to kick us off with our landing acknowledgement. Open Democracy acknowledges that we do our work on Endakina, the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the people who have stewarded Endakina throughout the generations and continue to do so today. And then I will kick it over to Olivia.
We just want to spend a little bit of time sort of talking about money. Why is money in politics a problem and how we can fix it? So if you have thoughts about how money in politics is a problem, feel free to drop that in the chat. If you're aware of how much money is being raised in the governor's race, if you're and you have thoughts about how to fix it, please chat away or shout out an answer if you have an answer. Bob Perry, why is money in politics a problem?
Most recently, Olivia, I was taken aback to learn that someone who is, I think, the richest person in the world, who owns a major communications platform, is willing to spend $45 million a month for his preferred candidate. That is more than disproportional influence. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing. And if people need an example for why there needs to be campaign finance reform, I believe that's the model for it.
Yeah, and Carolyn in the chat says corporations and special interests can buy elections. Everyday citizens don't have a voice in the process. I think that Curtis's point about Elon Musk donating $45 million a month is insane. That's exactly the correct voice. And Ophelia and I have looked at the numbers, and actually 12 mega donors, millionaires, have donated 60% of the money throughout the country over the last decade. So it's just 12 individuals that have given a lot of money to have influence over our politics. And the ways we can fix it is really about recreating balance between money and power in our political system. And so we have some ideas for New Hampshire for campaign finance reform through our voter-owned elections programs, but these programs have worked across the country. Could go to the next slide.
All right. So this is just a brief video for everyone. If it'll cooperate with me. There we go.
Our San Diego community is amazing.
Bye, boys. Have a good day.
We work hard. We take care of each other. We try to build a brighter future for everyone.
Fully charged.
And we come together to get things done. Sometimes, though, no matter how hard we work,
I really appreciate
Hey, Amy, we are so happy you are running for city council.
we don't see our city make progress on the issues we care most about, from affordable housing to great schools to good-paying jobs.
And this is how you get there.
That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is. Shall we go?
When we vote, we hope to give the keys to our community to leaders with the brightest minds and most commitment.
I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of City Council.
But with the amount of money needed to run in our local elections, candidates spend far more time fundraising than listening to voters. Too often, wealthy special interests try to pull our leaders off track. And we pay the price. But it doesn't have to be this way. We deserve leaders in City Hall who take direction from the people they serve. There's an innovative way where candidates can listen to the whole community while running for office, rather than just to big money groups.
A community infrastructure forum, I can do that.
And then we go to the pancake breakfast.
We need to bring small donor financing to San Diego City elections and put candidates who respond to voters in the driver's seat.
Democracy dollars. It makes sense.
Here's how small donor financing works. As an eligible voter, you would receive 4 Democracy Dollar certificates worth $25 each to give to the candidate or candidates of your choice at the beginning of each election cycle. Your Democracy Dollars help the candidates you like best to run for office and limit the influence of powerful special interests. A similar program in Seattle is transforming local elections, boosting voter turnout, increasing the number of voters who contribute to candidates, limiting the influence of the wealthiest donors, and encouraging candidates from all walks of life to run for office. By allowing candidates in our city to run for office without having to depend on big, outside corporate sources of money, we can keep our elected officials accountable to us. Candidates can only accept your Democracy Dollars after qualifying and agreeing to additional campaign finance rules.
That sounds good. So here's one for now, and I'll see you at the candidates forum.
Oh, absolutely.
Democracy Dollars encourage candidates and their communities to connect because every event, from knocking on doors to pancake breakfast to public forums, is now an opportunity to earn votes and collect Democracy Dollars to fuel their campaign.
I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of City Council.
Congratulations.
Join us, make your voice heard, and let's work together to bring Democracy Dollars to San Diego, returning power to the people and driving us forward. Find out how we can do this at democracydollars.info.
All right, and I did see in the chat Carolyn's comment that her daughter lives in Seattle and has access to a Democracy Dollar system and really appreciates having that access.
And so I think we're not in San Diego, but we're sort of thinking about doing a system similar to San Diego. So wanted to share that promotional video. But one of the models of the public funding system in New Hampshire, the bill that was introduced this last year would make it available for our executive council candidates. And the reason we wanted to have the democracy voter dollars available for executive council candidates is because they have a lot of influence over our government. And I think it's important for us to understand that each of these candidates are raising upwards of $100,000 for their seats. To date, there's a small amount of money that have been raised so far for the executive council candidates and spent because there's only been one report in June, which was prior to the filing period. And many of the candidates for executive council didn't fill out that June report. But as the campaign finance numbers come in, we'll see a lot more money spent in the executive council candidates races. And we do have a fact sheet, which I'll put in the chat of how much money was raised in 2022. There's also, I think, really important for us to remember is that the executive councilors approve contracts in our state. They're the ones that give out a lot of the spending, award a lot of the spending. And so it's a pay to play system. Many of the campaign dollars that go into executive council are from lobbyists or firms that want to get contracts. And so Ted Gatz's, I was looking at Ted Gatz's report in preparation for this training, who's a current executive council candidate. You can see the sort of pay to play politics in that. So I think it's important for us to know a lot more about the executive council race, like what they do, and also where they're getting their money from. We're going to share another video with you of a former executive council candidate illustrating this point of pay to play politics.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrew Volinsky. I'm running for governor in New Hampshire. People have a right to be cynical about money in politics. Here's what happened. I got sent a $500 check by a Fortune 100 accounting company. I didn't ask for it. I don't know anyone at the company. Now I know why they sent it to me. I was just asked to consider a $2 million no bid contract for, you guessed it, that same Fortune 100 company. Well, I say thanks, but no thanks.
So we don't have many leaders that rip up checks, campaign contributions for this no bid politics in our state, but I do appreciate leaders that sort of have that integrity and values. And I think it's important for us to be paying attention to who's financing the races, and that they're having values to make sure to look at contracts objectively.
So, were you saying something, Adam?
No, go ahead, Ophelia. This one's yours.
Okay, so just a little bit about what voter dollars are. It gives voters a stronger voice with elected officials, and it makes it possible for candidates of all walks of life to run for office and win. As I was explaining a little bit in the video previously, first, they would have to qualify for voter-owned elections by collecting required numbers of small dollar donations. Then every registered voter gets 425 voter dollar certificates to donate to the candidate of their choice. And then primary winners receive a grant to fund competitive general election campaigns. So really, it will give them a chance to be about the people and for the people. Next slide, please. And so here are some frequently asked questions about small donor funding of our elections. People ask, what is small donor funding, public funding, clean elections? What is it? What is a good solution? What states and cities have it? And what are the different systems?
So we're hoping to answer those questions in the next few slides.
Next slide.
And so the answer to how many jurisdictions across the country have some sort of public funding of elections, it's over 41 communities have jurisdictions. So Maine, Arizona, Connecticut have statewide systems, Minnesota. And then there's other places that have, there's a city, Seattle, New York, and then there's Maryland has a fair amount of counties where county government has it. And the money for these systems across the country come from different places. So in Arizona, it's a surcharge on speeding tickets. In Connecticut, it's abandoned property. In Seattle, Washington, it's property taxes. Every state funds their systems slightly different. Maine funded it through closing a corporate loophole in taxes, and I love that solution. In New Hampshire, we quite haven't figured it out yet. The bill that we proposed only put $1 into the general fund with the to open the fund, and then it would be privately contributed to the beginning part of the process. And it's something that we've been workshopping for many years. And the best resource that we have is a commission, the Clean Elections Commission in New Hampshire, that came up with a 2-page list of suggestions of where we could fund a clean elections program in New Hampshire. And I've been sort of always pointing to that list, saying the legislators need to decide how they fund this program if they really want it and to pass it, because I really want to make sure we have legislative voice and part of that discussion. But we have lots of ideas of how to fund it. And I have a spreadsheet of how all of the other states fund these systems. Yep, sure. Happy to put the link to, or we can share the link to how all the other systems work, the Google spreadsheet in the chat. We can head to the next slide. So I think it's also important to know that many systems have had public funding for a long time. Maine passed their system in 1996, and it's been working ever since. Connecticut passed their system in 2005, so almost 20 years ago, Connecticut passed their system. And Connecticut has 72% of candidates that participate in this election. Both parties participate. Maine also has both parties that participated. They had a little hiccup where they needed to raise the rates. So they did a ballot initiative to fix that. And now the participation rates are much higher. feel free to. So we slightly talked about this, and thank you, Carolyn, for sharing a little bit more about, you know, the democracy voucher in Seattle is $8 per homeowner. And we sort of say, you know, it would cost about $8 a voter here in New Hampshire too, the whole system. And Russ Muirhead, who was one of the sponsors of this, says you can't even get a whole sandwich in New Hampshire for that if you go out to eat. And so I think it's important to sort of put those in perspective of like, yes, this will cost us money in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire doesn't like to spend money, but I think it's also important for us to understand that we have higher electric rates, we have higher housing costs, we have higher healthcare costs when we are allowing this no bid system to go into place. Eversource passes higher rates on, the legislature passes it because Eversource is their campaign donors. We see this happening through multiple industries. So we know that taxpayers are paying the price for a lot of expensive items that we might not be, might be able to solve some of these problems if we solve the campaign finance system. So Seattle passed this by ballot initiative, and the first election that went into effect in Seattle city elections was 2017. They have seen growth every municipal election that's using the Seattle voucher program, the democracy voucher. And it's really amazing to see how this works. There was one election where a big corporation tried to buy every available television ad to buy access and influence, and they were unsuccessful. This system held up to that kind of outside expenditures. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that these systems work and work really well in the states that have, and the states and municipalities and cities that have already passed them. And when we're shaping our policy in New Hampshire, that we can learn from the other states that have gone before us in fixing this problem. Happy to take the next slide.
So in New Hampshire, we hope to have legislation for 2025, and the solution for that, how do we reduce the influence of money in politics and rebalance the system? A voluntary system of public funding for campaigns, also referred to as public financing of elections, provides a workable and proven alternative to privately financed campaigns. Next slide, please.
All right, so last year there was a poll that went out, specifically asking voters in New Hampshire how they're feeling about the legislative system. 90% of New Hampshire voters, 90% agree that our country is supposed to stand for the government by the people, and that big money makes a mockery of that. Because, as Olivia was saying, when the big money is influencing the voting decisions of our political leaders, it's not really representing the people anymore. Additionally, 84% of New Hampshire voters agree that politicians ignore them and listen only to the big donors who fund their campaigns, which can lead to some very cynical ideas when it comes to our legislation and our democracy. And I've definitely heard it in the people that I speak to about the different candidates who are running and that sense of cynicism that kind of permeates. 71% of New Hampshire voters are very concerned about the big donors funding our elections. And additionally, 71% of New Hampshire voters are very dissatisfied with our current state of politics in New Hampshire. Again, there's regular conversations that I've seen where people are asking, are we being made fun of on the international stage because of some of the laws that are being passed and how non-representative it is of the people at large. All right. So we're going to break out into pairs. We're going to do, I want to say 5 minutes where you can talk about what voter-owned elections are, what they would look like ideally here in New Hampshire, and why they're so important.
I have a question. My concern is in New Hampshire, because we're so small, that our Democratic Party, I mean, you do Republicans and Democrats, or is it just anybody who's interested in your organization?
So we're a nonpartisan organization. So we
Nonpartisan.
do both.
Okay. Well, with the Democratic Party, they focus all their funding on the upper part of the ticket. I'm running for state rep in a strong Republican district. And I've served 3 terms I've served, and one I lost. And now I'm coming back to try for another one because they redistricted and I'll have a better chance. It would be Northfield and Franklin. And it's hard to get money because from any organizations or PACs or anything like that. So anyway, I'll shut up and listen to everybody else. Okay. Can you put me back in the main group?
We are in the main group.
Oh, we are in the main group?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so that was one of my concerns, that I wanted to figure out how to go about doing this in our state to make it easier for the, you know, the ones that we have our boots on the ground closer than anybody up on the upper part of the ticket. That's for sure. So.
Yeah, and that really is one of the main reasons why we want to focus on voter-owned elections, particularly because we find when it's all privately funded, those smaller seats, if you don't have connections with wealthy donors, you're not going to make enough money to be able to stand up against someone who's raising millions.
Exactly. And
Correct.
it's not like we get paid a lot. So, I mean, if I had a lot of money, I'd fund my own campaign, but I'm just now hitting up friends, and I don't have any anybody competing against me in the primary. So I'm just trying to still build a base, and then I'll really go at it come the general, because I have two Republicans that are running. Then they're free staters, which is fine. I have no problem with free staters. But so I will have a contest come the general. And I wish we had this in place now. the coupons. This is the first time I've heard of it. Election coupons.
Yeah, it's something that we really want to pass here because it works so well in so many other states and cities.
Well, if I get elected, I'll be more than happy to work with Olivia and try and get something passed.
Great. We've introduced it a couple of years, so we've got, you know, a bit of momentum, but not enough to get
Yeah.
to the finish line. Okay,
But I like it.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Head to the next slide. Thanks for taking some time to talk to each other.
Mhm.
Ophelia?
Yeah, so how do we talk about reform? So we have, actually, Olivia had dropped in the chat our toolkit. So here are some talking points. I'm sorry, my dog. Here are some talking points for when you're speaking to Granite Staters, to voters. You want to let them know it gives the Granite State voters a stronger voice and power in our government, and it limits the power of wealthy elites, interest groups, and out-of-state funders. Back in 2020, 28.6% of funds spent on the governor's race and 14.6% of funds were spent on the executive council races came from out-of-state donors and donors of unknown funders. It also leads to greater civic participation, as voters who donate to campaigns through voter dollars are much more likely to vote. And it also makes our elected officials spend more time listening to the needs of everyday constituents rather than spending most of their time fundraising with wealthy donors. I was actually just having that conversation with June that, you know, with voter dollars, these candidates will be able to spend more time being true and genuine to who they are and focusing on everyday voters like you and I, instead of spending all their time speaking with these with these mega donors and really caring about our everyday people. Next slide, Autumn, please. So here are talking points for the candidates. It opens the door for any qualified candidate to run for office, not just these anyone with wealthy connections. As I was just saying in my breakout group, that I one day want to run for office myself, and I want to be able to have a fair chance to run. If I don't have any, wealthy connections or wealthy friends, am I not going to be able to win my race because I don't have the kind of funds or wealthy friends to be able to, raise enough money? It's voluntary. Candidates are not required to participate, but voters are more likely to support candidates they know will work for them rather than their big money donors. And it also limits the power of out-of-state interest groups by capping the amount of these groups can contribute to no more than 10% of a candidate's campaign's fund. It also limits the power of PACs and super PACs, as candidates are required to publicly disavow independent expenditures to their campaigns, and it provides enough money to campaigns and get their ideas out there. Candidates don't have to spend the most money to win, they just have to spend enough money to compete. Next slide.
I just wanted to emphasize here, when you're talking to the candidates, really getting across that idea of when voters have skin in the game, they're more likely to show up and support you. And when you're going out and you're doing your door-to-door knocking, trying to round up voters to support you, you can be fundraising at the same time with a voter dollar system versus having to do that and then go around and be calling all of these mega donors and spending so much more time trying to get that funding. And we wanted to open the floor for questions.
Okay. Feel free to pop some into the chat if you have them. We'll keep going with our presentation. I think we had a few more slides.
All right. So we've talked a lot about what voter-owned elections look like, how they can work for us, how our current system isn't really working for us, but how do you take action? That's kind of the big question that pops up. The first thing is to talk with people, talk with your friends, your neighbors, legislators, because if people don't know what voter-owned elections are, they're not going to know to advocate for that. They're not going to know to push for that there's a different way of doing things. Write a postcard to your candidates asking for voter-owned elections. We find that physical mail tends to get more eyes than digital mail. So you can email as well, but recommend a letter or a postcard, just because having something physical in your hand, it's like, oh, this is tangible. It exists. And then another option is joining our regional democracy teams. So basically, our regional democracy teams are volunteer-based. We give them actions every week that will help promote democracy in New Hampshire and nationwide, depending on the action. So we will propose different bills that you need to sign in on or write testimony for, give different upcoming events and trainings, different social media posts that you can highlight and share amongst your groups. There's a lot of different ways that you can participate in democracy, and it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can be small steps, and that group helps you take those small steps and fit it into your schedule.
And Autumn, we got a whole slew of questions. So if you want to go back to the question slide, I'm going to start answering. I'm going to take this question first because I feel like this will give a good background history. So the New Hampshire Public Funding Initiative, or voter-owned elections, it's gone through several series of different names, has been introduced starting in 2000. Granny D was part of introducing it in 2000. It lost by 2 votes. We got very close to passing that. We've introduced a bill over the last 20 years in many different forms, some including all offices, some including just some of the New Hampshire offices. And so this January, Senator Innes introduced a bill. It went through the Senate Election Law Committee and was killed by the New Hampshire Senate. 2 years ago, Russ Muirhead was the prime sponsor of the bill, and it died on the House floor. And we lost by 20 votes. So, but we had also 20 Democrats who didn't support this initiative either. So if all the Democrats had supported us 2 years ago, we would have at least gotten it over the threshold of going over to the Senate. So yes, Nancy, this does require legislation. We did have an initiative earlier this year. That House bill has died. Filing for legislation starts in September. So we will be sort of strategizing on whether we try to put a bill in September, or if we wait until after the election to know what the makeup of the House or the Senate is to introduce this, but have been working with champions and working with bipartisan champions. So a few years ago, we had 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats who spent the summer with us looking at the proposal and helping us wordsmith and strengthen the proposal. So we really could bring a more robust bipartisan bill back to that. And the bill actually has one of the bill versions became a study committee. So that Cook Commission, Brad Cook was on that committee. You sort of see him as the chairperson of that committee. So that report where they kind of came up with ideas and funding and a bill. And then there was a Clean Elections Task Force. Bob, is that the correct name? Bob Perry, who's on this call, served on that when he was a legislator too. So we've had many attempts at legislation, and I feel like each attempt gets us stronger. So Barbara, you said, how are the voter dollars given out to voters? And in this so in each state, they do them slightly different. Actually, Seattle allows anyone who's eligible to be a campaign donor to get a voter dollar, so that's more expansive than just registered voters. In New Hampshire, we said you had to be a registered voter in order to do that. And for the first thing, it would be mailed out to every registered voter. But it would require a lot of education. So candidates would have to, who opt into the system would have to really understand and learn how to do it. And they wouldn't have to go to town hall. The program would be administered by the Secretary of State. So if you register and, after that deadline, you would be eligible to get your voucher or your, I don't like the word voucher, but certificate, candidate certificate from the Secretary of State's office. In Seattle, they do a lot of that online. So you can assign your voucher online. So they have a real robust system for, Lake Act Blue or the Republican, where you want to assign your voucher to a candidate, you can make a campaign contributions going that way.
And if we get that online portal, then they could do it there.
Maybe. So Sue said on the slide, Connecticut actually passed clean elections. And in 2005, there was a big scandal. Connecticut passed it right after that sort of gubernatorial candidate scandal. And I think you're absolutely right. Even though the bill passed in 2005, it didn't go into effect immediately. So it did go into effect in the next election. And it's not a voter-owned election system in Connecticut. It's a grant match system. So when somebody gives you a donation, if somebody gave me $10, if I was a candidate eligible for the Connecticut system, someone gave me $10, the state government in Connecticut matches that, I believe 6-1. So they'd get an additional $60 match for that donation. So it's a slightly different system. So public funding of elections across the country are going to have what I call 3 different systems: the grant system, the voter dollar system, and the match system. And in this proposal that we introduced with Senator Innes earlier this year, it was sort of a hybrid where it was voter dollars for the primary and then a grant for the general, since the time frame between the general, the primary and the general is so small that there'd be a lump sum given, but it was only tailored to just the executive council candidates. It wasn't wide open for all the candidates.
Yeah.
We thought, oh, let's just start by trying to get it in for one race and not all of the races. But there's been other proposals and other bills that have been for a more robust system. And Carolyn's question, how did the New Hampshire bill fund donor dollars? So we had $1 from the general fund to open the bank account, and there were 4 sources of funding. So any fines on campaign finance violation went into the fund for voter dollars. Anybody could make a private donation to the fund. So private contributions were allowed into the voter dollar fund. There was a source to be determined by the legislator to finance the fund, which is kind of a slushy language, I get. And there was one other, I think it was one other election-based fee that went into the fund too.
Did you mention, Olivia, fines from?
Fines, yeah, fines, sorry, yes, fines. I called it a fee. It was a fine. Have fines that went into that fund. But I think that's the $1 million question, and the nut we have to crack with anything. Yeah, Carolyn, if you want to unmute and ask a follow-up.
You said election-based funds? What does that mean?
So current, if you have a campaign finance violation or election violation, the Attorney General can charge you up to 25% of that violation. So that robocall that was investigated, that was used by and didn't properly disclose, that's still being litigated, but there's been other election violations, and any fines that the Attorney General, fees or fines that the Attorney General awards we sort of said we were going to steal them for this fund to fund clean elections. So that was one of the sources in the last version of the bill. But each version of the bill has been slightly different over the years. I also put the 2-page report where there were a lot of ideas. I know one legislator really wanted us to pass a 5-cent can. So any can that got recycled would then go into the Clean Elections Fund. I love that idea.
I love that. I love the play on clean elections.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good one. So it wasn't something, you're not saying that there was anything where candidates, when they filed and paid a fee, that any of that would be going towards the donor dollars?
Those fees are pretty low when candidates, I think a state rep, when they file for office, is $2. So I know that those fees are used to print the ballots. So we didn't want to steal that money.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, and then Nancy has a question. It seems like a modest amount of money for each of these certificates. With 4 reps, 1 senator, 1 executive council, and a bunch of county positions, would I be able to donate to all of them?
The way the system was designed is that you'd get 4 $25 certificates, and you'd have to give $25 to 4 unique people. But I'm open to the idea that you would get $100 and be able to divide that however you want. To candidates, I just think that we want to just sort of do it in a way that would be easy to administer. And I think you're right. The county commissioners. So I actually think in not all of the proposals, it's only been your state rep, your senator, your executive council, and your gubernatorial candidates. We haven't thought about county offices, but it would be kind of interesting to sort of start at a even local level. That might be an interesting way to propose a new bill. So thanks for that suggestion and idea. We're also happy to take other questions. So
Yes. I just didn't see any in the chat.
go ahead and keep going, Autumn.
All right. So, oh, as soon as I started saying something.
Would a
The-
municipality need permission from the state first, Barb? That's a great question. And I do not think so. Municipalities have the an ability to create their own campaign finance rules right now. So it's unlike elections that are overseen by the state level. Local elections are campaign finance rules are administered locally. So we need a lot more municipalities. I think only 4 or 5 New Hampshire municipalities have any campaign finance rules. So we need a lot more municipalities to have local campaign finance rules. So I know Autumn wants to close tonight's program to share a few upcoming events. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then happy to hang around if anyone has additional questions.
Yeah. So we have several events coming up. So this week we have our sign making party for our Democracy Festival and Granny D Memorial Walk. Then next Saturday, not this Saturday, the following, we have the Granny D Walk itself and the Democracy Festival. All 3 of those are happening in Peterborough and should be a great time. We have more trainings coming out. The poll worker roles training on August 7th at 6 p.m. The misinformation and disinformation training on August 14th. And the nonpartisan poll observing training on August 28th. We also have a fundraising event with the New Hampshire Fisher Cats called Primary Night, where they bring out their retired uniforms from back when they were the New Hampshire primaries and have a game. And so we're selling tickets for that event at a discounted rate, and part of the proceeds goes to Open Democracy, so we can continue doing this work and doing more trainings. Additionally, we have a high school voter registration conference coming up on September 14th at St. A's College. And then for our literary friends, we have some literature events coming up as well. We have the reception with Miles Rappaport at the Women's Club of Concord on September 15th. He recently released a book called 100% Democracy, which he'll be discussing there. Olivia, did you want to talk more about Miles?
Miles is the former Secretary of State of Connecticut and was a Democracy Fellow at Harvard and was a longtime Common Cause staff person too. So a really amazing person. So we're grateful that he's going to drive up to Connecticut to speak in New Hampshire.
And then later in September, on September 24th, we have our book club reading Democracy in Black. Make sure to get those books now because I think they're all on order right now. I don't know of many stores that have it physically on the shelves. We also have the book festival with Book the Vote on October 4th. And then our final book club of the year, Democracy Awakening, with Heather Cox Richardson. She will actually be making an appearance to have a bit of a Q&A, and that's on December 11th. And then I saw a couple things pop up in the chat. Oh, Just thank you. Okay.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. That's the end of our formal program, but I think we're able to hang around and answer any questions if you want. We'll take the slides down and have a discussion.
I just wanted to thank you for this program because I didn't, I knew about voter-owned elections, but I didn't realize that there were so many good examples. And so it's nice to see how it plays out in different communities. And one thing that Ophelia and I talked about is, more people would probably run if they had a chance to be in a system like this.
Yeah.